All right, I want to welcome those of you who are joining us via Facebook Live, as well as those who are here with us at Calvary Baptist Church. For our panel discussion today, our skill builder topic is serving the church without losing your family. Now, before we go any further, I want to kind of put a disclaimer onto that. And that is that ministry leaders' families have problems just like everyone else, right? We're not immune to those things. Financial challenges, busyness, kids that kind of go off in a direction we don't want them to go off in, health issues, relational, other problems. So when we talk about not losing your family, that doesn't mean some kind of Ozzie and Harriet perfection that doesn't really exist, right? For the purposes of this discussion, we'll define losing your family as being so focused on the ministry that you fail to fulfill your responsibilities as a spouse and or a parent. That's what we're talking about. So avoiding that doesn't mean your family's not going to have problems, of course. It just means you won't be causing the problems because of neglect. And so hence the topic, serving the church without losing your family. Our panel today is a group of experienced ministry leaders from our association. Pastor Brad McLean has been at First Baptist New Braunfels now for how long, Brad?
17.
17 years.
Yes, next month, 17.
And about to get his second sabbatical of his tenure, all right? Which is nice.
Yes.
That's awesome. Paul Brand is lead pastor of Bulverde Baptist Church, and you've been in that role now for how many years?
Since 19.
Since 19. All right, so about 5 years. But before that, he served as student pastor for a long stretch at Bulverde, and then as executive pastor. So he's pretty much done it all over there. They don't have you leading singing or anything, do they?
Every once in a while, I put my mic on just to give the sound guy some fits.
Where was that distortion coming from?
Pretty much.
David Payton is the senior pastor of Lockhart First Baptist Church. Before that, he was in a chaplain ministry in Arizona. Before that, he was a church planter in our association. Before that, when I first met him, he was interim worship leader at First Baptist New Braunfels. And then he has a long history in the worship ministry in the years before that.
Not that long.
Well, it's pretty long. It's pretty long. Yeah, it's gray hair long. Yeah, it's been around a while. So these guys I asked them if they would be willing to share what they've learned through trial and error, maybe through hard knocks, maybe through some wisdom they've gleaned along the way about serving the church without losing your family. So the first, since this is a discussion intersects both church and family, I want them each to tell us a little bit about their family, their spouse, children, whatever else you guys want us to know. So y'all can pass the microphone down.
Well, married for 24 years. I've got 3 kids. Jacob, who's 22, sergeant in the Army at Fort Riley, Kansas. My middle son is finished up his sophomore year, played college baseball, just hung that up to go and do landscaping and finish school, and so he's had a change of heart in his game. And then I've got a daughter who just finished her freshman year playing softball at Angelo State, and my wife is just quit teaching after 13 years now, office manager for a friend of ours, concrete company. So, like Robbie said, I've been in the church for 06 and different roles and that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit about my family.
Fun fact about Paul, he's a Little League umpire, all right? Oh. And we're talking big-time Little League. He's going to be umpiring in a regional tournament. Yep. This is just one step short of the Little League World Series, right?
That's right.
All right, can you just randomly eject somebody here from the meeting? Just throw them out. Just say, you're out of here.
Fun fact, Little League umpires do not have the authority to eject people from the stands.
What's the fun in that?
Only people within the game premises. We don't let that secret get out too much, but we have to get a board member or a tournament official. But anyone outside the fence, we actually have no authority over. Fun fact.
Hey, we're all in the fence here, so just come on, Blue. Brad, tell us about your family.
Brad McLean. Holly is my wife. Next month we'll be married for 31 years. And she is an educational therapist, diagnostician with New Braunfels Christian Academy. And we have a son who's 22, and we recently added a daughter-in-law to the family back in April. And we have a daughter who is going to be a junior in high school. Her name is Lauren. David is his name. Lauren is her name. So
awesome.
All right. Yes, I have a wife, Wendy, of 28 years. We have 5 kids, 3 the old-fashioned way biologically, and 2 that are adopted from Haiti. And my oldest serves in a collegiate ministry at University of Arizona with her husband. They both work for student mobilization there. The next two are my Haitian adopted kids. They're both working full time there in Lockhart. One with Pegasus School, and the other with Amazon. And then my next daughter, is a junior now at Abilene Christian University studying musical theater, which is also what my oldest girl graduated with. And my son is going to be a senior in high school. So there you go.
All right. First question after the introductions is this. In your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that ministry leaders make that negatively impact their families? So we're talking about mistakes in thinking or practice or boundaries or whatever that we often make as ministry leaders that can really have some negative repercussions for our family members. So we'll go in order, and I'll start with you, Paul.
For me, I think the biggest thing is not listening, or maybe even a chance to ask the question to give you a chance to listen. For me, my father-in-law was in ministry, and I'll never forget the look on his face and the finger pointing at me when he says, "Never sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry. You have one family, and there are thousands of churches and millions of jobs you can have, but you only have one family. Don't you ever do that. This is my daughter." And I'll just very vividly remember that conversation. And so I've put the opportunity to ask my kids a question, because when I show up at church, my kids have to share me. When I'm in the house, they don't share me with anyone. When I'm at church, they share me with several other people. And so I just ask them questions. Hey, did that bother you today when Dad had said, "Hold on a second," And so listening, I think, is the biggest thing that we don't do well enough sometimes in reading our kids or our wives. But that being said, I think sometimes we need to give them the opportunity to speak up. And so asking the questions to say, "Hey, did I do this well? What could I have done better next time? Did Daddy make you feel this?" Whatever. So just listening really is a key thing we need to do.
Have they ever responded to that question with some things that were hard for you to hear?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you handle that?
Actually, not even just too long ago. So like I said, my daughter is she's 19, finished her freshman year in college. She's a daddy's girl. And so she comes to me every Sunday morning, and she comes up and she snuggles up next to me and grabs my arm, puts her head on my shoulder. She's an affectionate person. She loves, like I said, she's a daddy's girl. She wants me to give her a kiss on the forehead every night before she goes to bed, still to this day. And so there was a time I was in a conversation with someone, and it was a private conversation, and she came up next to me, and I said, "Not now." And the way I said it, and it was not the best of way. And she walked away. And then I knew what I had said. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry. What I should have responded differently, but that was a private conversation. So maybe when you're walking towards me, kind of make eye contact with me first if you can. And I can give you the nod like, 'Hey, not right now,' or 'It's fine, come on in.'" And that was a way for us to be able to communicate better. But yeah, even just recently, I've kind of not done it well and had to follow up and say, "Hey, not every time's an appropriate time, but we need to work on some things." But we have the relationship where we can have those hard conversations and listen to one another.
Pastor Brad, common mistakes?
Yeah, I just have a list. Sorry if I infringe on your list, but the first thing I wrote down with that common mistake is forgetting that you are the leader of your family, as Paul was pointing out. They have one you. Your wife has one husband. Your children have one father, and so you lead your family because no one else can. So that has to be prioritized. The second here is just placing unreal expectations on your children because they are your children. When we came here, we came to a church with ministers had children in the church, and I didn't like everything their children did. But as my children grew up, I didn't want to place on them and say, "No, you're my child, you have to act this way." I just wanted my children to be children, and I would correct them as their father from things I did not want them to do, but I didn't expect them to go to every youth event or make every children's event. I didn't want to place that upon them so that they could have as normal of experience within the church. They just happen to be my children. As David pointed out, two of his children, both of my children are adopted. So, it's a situation where they were chosen for this life, if you will. But I wanted to make sure that they weren't expected to be perfect or do everything right or be the star of every children's ministry or youth event. I just wanted them to be children. And so I think that was an important thing for me. And I would say to us as church leaders that believing that we are business owners and that the business depends on us. We are not business owners. We have a master, and we serve his church at his pleasure. I know and I know we have some church planners in here, and I'm not taking any shots at anyone, but it has seemed to me that church starting has almost become entrepreneurial in its focus, where all of the focus is upon the church planter. And I think that's significantly dangerous. Because if God calls you to plant a church, then you are serving the kingdom within that local fellowship. And so I don't believe that we are business owners. We were servants of the King. And therefore, people, you may have heard this, a number of you guys with experience have heard this. Someone tells you, well, you can do that, but I'll be here longer than you, and we'll change it back when you're gone. Right? That's just a reminder. This church has been here longer than you, and it's going to be here after you leave. So you certainly have your role within the church, but that church is not dependent upon you. So, also, the fourth thing is this, expecting too much of your wife. I always said to my wife, and my wife is fantastic. I think she is a fantastic pastor's wife. But for she and I, our goal was to be good church members. Now, to be good church members means that you're engaged within the body of the church, right? And I wanted her to serve in the areas of which she is gifted. And she has done that and has not felt the pressure to lead a women's Bible study or start new ministries or do all of those things. But she serves and she's very engaged within the life of the church. So, I think we see with more high profile pastors, the pastor does all this and then the wife has all of her stuff too, and she's on the same level, and they call them, they start to call them pastor. And so I think then there becomes a competing relationship there. Who's doing better? And here's the reality, gentlemen. They're going to like your wife more. Usually. But just let your wife be your wife. Let her serve within the body of the church without saying, you have to do these things.
Brad, it would seem that in order to be able to avoid putting those undue expectations on your family, wife and children, you have to keep your own ego in check. Because knowing, especially with kids, they're not going to be perfect. They're going to do some things that church members are going to see that we might not necessarily want them to see. So keeping your own ego in check, has that been something that you've had to grapple with or at least address in your own life?
Why do you address it? You were part of my church for a long time. Was that something you saw in me?
Tossing you a softball. No, but I mean, just because those expectations we put on them probably come from, hey, I'm going to look bad if they don't do certain.
Well, you certainly make a good point there. Hopefully you put your ego in check when God called you to ministry, and realizing that I'm not my own. I belong to Him, and therefore I have to serve at His pleasure. The reality of how people respond to the things you do and to your leadership. Some people are going to love you. Others are going to be critical of everything you do. I tell people, waking up in the morning angers some people in my life. I know that. Me waking up. My waking up in the morning bothers some people. I firmly believe that. But I think the ego part of that has to has to be dealt with because in all ways we are servants. And so that dictatorial leadership, I think, is a really fine line that needs to be watched in our life, because we are servants, and expecting our families to be perfect, again, is not fair to them,
Right.
And it would do nothing but bring us frustration and arguments, within our own household. But I think we have to show as much grace and patience to our own families as we're willing to do with other church families.
Amen.
And I think ego has a lot to do with that.
Well said. David, common mistakes.
All right, where our kids are concerned, I think I'm speaking for all of us, there's really no choice whether or not they get up and go to church. They're kids of the pastor, they're going to church. And they're going to be expected, right or wrong, to be at all the activities, the youth activities, the kids' activities, whatever those things may be. The same is true for our wives. If there's a women's event, she's expected to be there. The assumption is that she'll be there. And so I think what can happen over time is the ultimate leading the horse to water, but not making them drink kind of thing. As our kids grow up with the stories that are found in Scripture, and at some point they lose some of their punch. When I was a youth pastor, the most difficult kids to reach were the kids of staff members, because they know it all. Just ask them. and you can't reach them. You can't. The story of Jesus healing the blind man doesn't hit the way that it does when you hear it for the first time when you're 20 years old. They've just heard it all of their lives. And so the result of that in my family has been, I referenced my oldest girl who's now working in ministry. She made it all the way through, going to everything, being the perfect little preacher's kid, church girl. And she gets to college and at some point realizes she doesn't have a faith of her own. She was running on the faith of her parents and regurgitating the things that she had been told and taught over and over again. But there wasn't this personal one-on-one relationship with Jesus that we all just, at least I and my wife, just assumed that is there. I baptized her myself. She came to know Christ. But the growth hadn't happened because she was riding on our coattails and saying, I'm going to church, I'm doing the thing, hey, whatever. And there had to come a time where she started a personal relationship with him. And so if I had it to do again, if my kids were younger and we were going through the whole thing again, then I would focus much more on discipleship, much more on what is Jesus to you personally? What's that relationship look like? How have you grasped a hold of it and made it your own? And then maybe also this, that and Brad mentioned this, I think, that thing of saying, hey, look, you're my son, you're going to youth tonight. Where every other kid in that youth group, they get hall passes from time to time. They tell their parents, I don't feel like going. And they're like, okay, don't go. I don't feel like going, I got homework. Okay, we'll do your homework. But our kids don't get that. And so at the very least, you can develop this thing that I've already mentioned of, I don't have this personal relationship with Jesus. I have this thing that my parents made me go and learn all this stuff. And at the very worst, build this resentment of the church and for the church, maybe even for God. That says, I want to be doing these things, but because of who my dad is, and because we're part of a church, I have to go and do these things. And they don't have any choice in the matter. And I think it's a mistake looking back to just say, you're going to everything. You're going to everything because I'm the pastor. I've even said, man, to my great shame, I've even said to my son, you can't act like this. Man, that reflects badly on me. I'm the pastor of the church. And that is not fair. That's not fair. Even to a high school age kid to be saying that kind of stuff. They can't carry the weight of my reputation. That's absurd. No.
Good point. Next question is, sometimes the church can be complicit in ministry leaders losing their families or not fulfilling their family responsibilities, because churches, I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes they place unhealthy expectations on ministry leaders. And so I want to know from you guys, have you experienced a time when you kind of had to deal with an unhealthy expectation in your ministry? And if so, I would be curious as to what you learned from that, how you dealt with that, and did it lead to any changes in your ministry? Brad, we'll start with you. You're first.
Okay. I don't really know that I have,
Okay.
where folks have come to me and said, you have to do these things. But I do have some thoughts on it.
Good, please.
Many of you are familiar with Ed Young out of Houston. I heard him say that if it was between a church event and his son's ball game, he's going to go to his son's ball game. That's his choice. And I think when I first heard that, this is probably back in the 80s, and you think that's for a pastor, he's going to not do something with the church. But that's always kind of helped me understand my children are more important than a meeting. Because, again, they have one father, and that's that one event. And so just some thoughts I had with that is people will use you as long as you're usable. They will use you. And then if, sadly, the case comes where your family breaks down, then they will discard you and wonder why you did not take care of your family. And so you have that one thing to protect, and that is your family. Because as much as the church can be loving and supportive and all of those things, they're not as concerned about your family as you need to be. And so if you're not serving your family well, then you're not going to serve the kingdom well. It's just not going to be a reality in our life. Final thing here. Your church will have greater respect for you if you take care of your family, and if you take care of your wife, and if you tell them, no, you can do that. Did you know that? No, my son has a ball game. My daughter has a ball game. That's where I'm going to be. No, my wife and I, that's a time that we protect during the week, and they may not like it, but they will respect you for it.
All right. That was good. What was the question?
So sometimes the church is complicit in
Okay.
unhealthy expectations. In fact, they'll even brag on you while you're working yourself to death and neglecting your family.
Thank you.
So have you dealt with anything like that, and how so?
No, here's what I did. In the first church that I ever went to as a youth and worship pastor out of seminary, I sat with the search team that did not include the pastor, by the way. It was just the search team. And I told them on no uncertain terms, I told them these are my priorities and the roles that I fill in my life. First of all, I'm a follower of Christ. First and foremost, that's who I am. Secondly, I'm a husband and a father. Secondly, these are priorities in my life. First thing, follower of Christ. Second thing, family man. Third thing is that I'm a church member, a member of the body of Christ. On the whole, universal, and the member of the body of Christ at this particular place. And then number 4 is a vocational staff member of your church. So I let them know at the very outset, establish this early on, that I have 3 things in my life that are more important than my job at the church. And I maintain that to this day. And will go to my grave thinking those other 3 things are more important than that. I also told them I have a certain period of time to get my job done during the week, and then I'm going home. And I got really good at, really because I was a police officer before I went to seminary, I got really good at kind of shutting off my work brain and being in my family brain. And I think even in ministry, we need to try and leave our work at work. And when we're at home, we need to be at home. And so those priorities, those roles that I fill, every single church that I've been to, every interview I've had, I've said the same thing in this regard. I've used that analogy, and I said this is what the priorities are, and the way that I conduct myself as a staff member is going to reflect those priorities. And then when there is pushback, and there was at that first church from my pastor, in fact, claiming I wasn't putting enough hours in and this kind of stuff, I said, look, this is what I said to the search team. They agreed and they hired me, and that's what it's going to be. And if that's not workable, we can go back to personnel and talk about it. But I stick to that period. And And I will admit that the last thing I've ever been accused of is workaholism.
Good, good. Paul, unhealthy expectations?
Yeah, so my daughter played travel softball, and so that's travel sports that's a big thing, and so there's different viewpoints on it, but this is what we chose to do for our family, which is the fact that I'm the discipler of the family. The discipleship should happen within the home. The family should not be dependent on the church to feed them everything. And we want to feed the church so they can feed their families. And I knew that there was a kind of a no one ever came to me. You know how it is in church. No one's really going to really come directly to you, but you kind of, I heard, or, you know, those types of things.
People are saying,
you know, and my daughter had missed 3 Sundays in a row for a travel softball tournament. She was in Colorado and she was in California. I took her on the California trip and different things like that. And so we missed. And so I knew that there was a little bit of a tension, that kind of thing. And so I was sitting around some people in our church and I just kind of cast the vision for my family. I knew there were some people who weren't happy. One person did make a comment. She played a game at the Fourplex, and they lost the 8 a.m. game. And so the rule was if you lose on an 8 a.m. game, then you're coming to church. And so they lost, and my daughter shows up, covered head to toe in softball dirt at church. And they were like, well, you know, why is she? I said, well, they lost, and so they're in church, kind of a thing. And I just lovingly reminded people that, it's interesting that when some people who can take, 2, 3, 4 week long cruises or go vacation and get an RV and be gone all summer, it's interesting that we're not really upset with those families who travel over the summer, because they may be retired or because they own their own business or things like that. They are afforded those opportunities. But we're here because is it we're more upset that Paul is not discipling his family, or is it that his daughter wasn't in church? Now, if it's church attendance, then let's rule everyone with the same stick. But if it's discipleship, then let's have that conversation and ask ourselves, is Paul's daughter talking about Jesus with her softball players? Are there other people coming to church as a result of his kid's influence? Is Paul discipling his family? Or are we just upset that his daughter went to go play softball or his son had a baseball game? And there was just Sundays that I wasn't there. I took a vacation day and I left and I went to a tournament. And people will be like, well, where is he? He's like, well, he's at a softball tournament watching his daughter. He's using his vacation days. And so I know there was some uneasiness of that. But over time, we've seen the fruits of that. We've seen those same people in the church that may have been kind of mumbling, love to show up when they played St. Mary's to go, hey, I hear Abby's Angelo State's playing in San Antonio. What time do they play? And so they've seen that my daughter loves the Lord. They see my son loves the Lord. He's moving back, and his first thing, his question was, Robbie, we need to go have lunch. That's our youth pastor. We want to have lunch because I want to serve in youth ministry now that I'm back closer to home. And so they've seen the fruits of my wife and I discipling our families. And even though what they chose to do or not to do with their family looks different than ours, they understand that Deuteronomy 6, it's our job to sit down when they lie down, when they walk around, when they lie down in the bed, they get up. It's our job to do that with our families. And if I'm not discipling my family, that's what we have a conversation on, not the fact that they weren't here because they played a softball game. Because that's the case, then you're not there because you decided to go to the beach. Those are, equivalent things. So
you guys have all touched on some boundaries, practices, priorities you've set. So you may have already answered part of this question, but I want to ask it anyway. And that, what specific boundaries or practices have you guys put in place to help you fulfill both your responsibilities to your family as well as to your church? In other words, where have you maybe in your own life negotiated, dealt with, set some of those boundaries and practices? And if you've experienced any pushback on those things from church members, how you responded to those? David, I'll send the mic down to you and we'll go back this way.
Well, again, I don't work extended hours. I don't put in a whole bunch of time and crow about that kind of stuff. I stay as long as I need to do to get the job done. And there are seasons when that is well beyond, 40 hours a regular work week or whatever. But man, I do have set times where I'm doing things. I'm going home. You can work as much as you want. You can spend as much time at church as you want to spend, and work will still be there. There will still be things to do. So again, I go back to those priorities that I've laid down. And I said, this is how I'm going to live my life, how it's going to be. In terms of my family, they serve where they want to serve. You know, if they want to serve, if they have gifts in some area, my kids or my wife, then they get on fire about that and they go do that. If they don't and they don't serve anywhere extra, also up to them. And so I'm very sensitive to that idea of not embittering them towards the church, my kids, that is. Not embittering them, well, Dad made me do these things in the nursery, or Dad made me serve in this way, or I had to come up and help the custodial staff, or whatever it is. Just decided we weren't going to do that, that our kids weren't called to ministry, not yet. The church didn't hire them, and like Brad said, the church didn't hire my wife. If they want to and they want to pay us more, cool, but that's not what happened. And so we try very hard to protect all of that. Those are the boundaries as far as I'm concerned, is saying, hey, where you want to serve and you feel passionate about it, just like any other church member, that's what you can do.
Brad, boundaries?
Yeah, just pretty simple in my mind. Number one is prioritize my wife. We've been really, really blessed through these 31 years. We really like each other. At least I like her a whole lot. I don't know if
She's coming along.
I don't know if it comes and goes for her.
She's coming along.
But we just enjoy each other's company, right? And so that has been really important for us to make sure we are spending time together. And if we do have seasons where things are just a little chaotic, there always comes that kind of moment where we look at each other and think, okay, we need to do something together. We need, we're missing each other here along the way. So that's been important for Holly and I to make sure we spend that quality time and have the conversations and do the things we need to do to make sure she knows that I'm prioritizing her over anything else in our marriage. Being Gen X, that's what you are too. That's why you have the gray hair. Our generation, I think we saw a lot of our parents engaging and investing so much in their children, and then when the children left, the parents looked at each other and said, "Who are you again? We need to reintroduce ourselves," because they've lost that marriage. They lost that part of the relationship. And so I just wanted to be very intentional on making sure that, and I tell this to my children, I love your mother more than you. I think it's okay to say that. I do. I love your mother more than I love you. And I love her in a different way. Because I knew her and committed my life to her as she committed to me before you came along. Right? You're just a byproduct of the marriage, a blessing of the marriage. And so just making sure that they know she is my priority.
That will actually give them more security than if it was the other way around.
I think so.
Absolutely.
I do think so. And then the second part of that obviously is being engaged in your children's life. Letting them know that you care about them, you support them in the things that they are doing, you show up. I remember in my life, my dad and my mom as well, they were there. They were there for ball games. They were there for all those things that mattered. And so I wanted to make sure that they know I'm involved in their life as well, and I'm celebrating with them and hurting with them, and all of those things that that they're experiencing. I'm doing my best to make sure I'm there as well, and so just those boundaries of protecting those relationships.
Paul, boundaries in your own ministry and family?
There's usually two ways you find a boundary. One is to bump up against it, and the other one is to remind people of where it's at. One could cause pain. One usually is painless, and so I always take the time, as I use the word cast vision with those people that one time. I remind my deacons and our staff and even our personnel team and thank them for the opportunity they allow me to do certain things. When last summer I took 2 Sundays off back to back and drove to California for a national tournament, which my daughter's team, they won first place. So it was like a memory of a lifetime. That next Sunday, I just thanked them. I said, thank you for allowing me 2 weeks with my daughter in California to be at the tournament, to do something, to watch as a father, watch your daughter do something that she loves, and then to come home with the first place tournament and at a national competition was awesome. Thank you for allowing me to be dad this last week. And so that's just another way to remind them this is a boundary. And even before I left, I let certain people know, hey, I'm gone this week. So if you need me, just leave a message with my secretary. And then I told my staff, if you need me, it's an emergency, call me. But other than that, I'll touch base back. So I think reminding people where the boundaries are healthy. The other thing is, like, this is kind of a little small thing. It's not quite with the family, but as the pastor, I don't stay till 5 o'clock in the office, but our front office ladies do because they're hourly paid and they stay there until 5 o'clock. But I'll cut out around 3:30 or 4 because I'm going to go home, and that was my time to be home when the kids got home from school. It's a promise my wife and I made to each other. But I can tell it's always not fair that I get to leave early and they've got to stay till 5. And so reminding people that, you know, the beautiful thing sometimes in this position is that you don't get a call at 10 o'clock or at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I might. And so there's this give and take in how this goes. And then when I do find out that my secretaries were bothered, you know, after hours, I take them to lunch. And I just say, hey, thank you for doing something that you probably didn't need to do. And so I remind people, like, this is a healthy expectation that I have of myself. I sit down with the personnel team. This is what I'm doing. By the way, I'm going to leave the office around 3:34 because I'm salaried and I'm not hourly, which means you're going to get my time back at another time. It's going to be a Saturday morning. It's going to be a Saturday afternoon. It's going to be those types of phone calls. But I'm going to be here for my family, and I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity where you're not clocking my hours, where I can just leave in the afternoon and be present and be husband, be father, because if I can't minister to my family, then I don't have any business ministering to the church family. And so thank you for allowing me to do this. And so I take the opportunity, instead of just bumping up against those boundaries, and let my family know I've gotten too close to the edge, I just remind myself what it is, and I remind everyone else where the boundaries are. And people know, hey, that's time. I think you mentioned this is my time with my wife, and so they're going to respect that. And so I think that's important, just reminding people.
All right, we have made it to the speed round.
Yeah.
This is the speed round. In 30 seconds or less, how would you complete this sentence? If you don't want to lose your family, make sure you fill in the blank. Paul, we're going to start with you.
I would say make sure my family, know that they are valued and important.
You're a husband and father first. That's what you are.
Be their husband and father, don't be their pastor.
Well, that was fast.
We did all three in less than 30
We
seconds.
actually have extra time now. During the discussion, were there any questions that may have arisen in your mind that didn't get addressed in the discussions? Anybody have a question for the panel or for me, or just something you want to throw out there? Questions, thoughts?
Don't forget romance.
Don't forget romance. All right.
I keep telling her. No.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Don't forget romance. You're a married person. If in fact you are a married person, you've got somebody that you love, and don't forget to keep that spark going and that flame.
Right.
I got a question.
Yes.
How often do you cook for your wife?
How often do you cook for your wife? By her request, never. Never. But that has not always been the case. There were times when I did do that because she was the primary income earner in our families at times when I was in school and other things. And so there have been times when I cook. She's very happy those days are over.
Anybody else want?
Do we have any cooks? Anybody want to comment on cooking here?
I do all the outside cooking.
I grill.
All the
Now,
outside cooking.
one thing I do routine, if it involves open flame and fire, men are here, one thing I do regularly, though, is I clean up. I do the dishes, and my job is to unload the dishwasher when it's clean and all that kind of stuff. She figures I can't do too much damage if I'm doing that. It won't give anybody food poisoning. I do. I bring her coffee. Thank you for pointing that out, dear. I bring her coffee. every morning because she doesn't actually know how to make the coffee. So I do that. But anyway, what else? Yeah, Sam.
Yes, very practically, you guys something about shutting off your ministry brain. You've been doing this for a long time. How do you do that in a very practical sense, especially like at the end of your day? You just counseled, a couple, and some horrible comes out, and you're just like really burdened by that, and you're 15 minutes from home. What are you practically doing to shut off your ministry brain so you're not taking that stuff in with your wife and your children?
All right, so practical tips on how you transition from work to home and leave your ministry brain at church and put on your family brain and don't let those things interfere with one another. Practical tips, and this will be our last one, so whoever wants to address it.
I was going to say, for me, I don't do that well, but what I feel like I do well is communicate. So if I've got something really harsh, my family will know about it. Say, hey, just so y'all know, I just came from a meeting. I'm really upset right now. And my kids give me that space because they know typically 9 times out of 10 that's going to not be the case with me. But if I'm really burdened by something, I don't make my family carry the burden, but I do let them know I'm carrying one versus just shutting it off. I don't do that well, but I do communicate honestly and openly.
Yeah, as under shepherds, I don't think you ever just completely shut off. There's always that concern about the people that you pastor. For me personally, I go in my garage and hit golf balls. It's just something physical, right? That you kind of try to work some of that out, and which also allows me to think on the subject as well, to see how I might be able to better serve them.
I assume you have some kind of a net thing and balls aren't just ricocheting all around the garage.
That metal garage door looks really bad.
You got a few divots.
No, there's there are a few dimples, but there's a net.
David, turn it off work brain, and this will be our last word for today.
I was picturing the same thing, man. You hit the ball and then take cover. I don't know the best answer to that. Early on in my career, it was prayer time. In between those times, we had 5 kids. They were within 7 years of each other, from the oldest to the youngest, because the adopted 2 were right in the middle of all of that. So when I got home, they were this amazing distraction from anything else in the world. And walk in and 5 kids just kind of tackle you. So the good stuff that was at home was so attractive to me that it was easy to kind of focus on that. But I do think it's a discipline that God helps you to develop, I think, and it works to varying degrees depending on what you're coming from, depending on what you heard that day and what you're experiencing in church. And certainly there are those seasons where it just takes over everything, and despite your best efforts. But I think on a daily basis, you want to try to focus on home when you're at home and focus on church when you're at church.
Let's show some appreciation for these 3 gals. Thank you, friends, colleagues, brothers. I appreciate you being willing to share and give us your time today. That was extremely valuable. Before we dismiss, there are a couple of prayer requests I want you to know about.